What is up, humans and mutants alike? My name is Kyle. We are going back through our old catalog and re-uploading them onto YouTube in what we are calling Podcast of X Classics. So, enjoy. What is up? My name is Kyle. I'm with Danny. We are here once again, Podcast of X, talking about Powers of X issue number 4.
Who are you? What do you want with us?
My name is Sinister. Mr. Sinister.
Now, last week, we talked about House of X issue number 4, and a lot of people died. How'd you feel about that?
That was a very death-filled issue, but also a very heavy payoff issue of just like everything that built up before it was going to just fall over instantly. All the dominoes. There was no slow burn. It was a quick burn, and we definitely got to see the ashes real fast, literally and figuratively.
Oh yeah, as people incinerate.
It was a great issue, though. It really was. Like as shocking as it was still like a really enjoyable issue. It had its fun, and you'll see some in this issue. Like Hickman can be really serious, but he can also be really comical and like just a drop of a dime, like instantly, just boom. Here's a joke. Yeah. Now back to like heart-wrenching, like, you know, death and drama, and then pain, also a joke layered into it. But yeah, it was great, and you get a little bit more of like the same kind of payoff in this issue. Not so much as in like the grandeur of like death, but more in just the plot and just reveal aspect of what Hickman has been writing here.
Yeah, we're moving things forward. We're learning things, definitely, as we move forward. And again, this is Powers of X, or Powers of 10, if you will.
Roman numeral X.
So we're time traveling, essentially. This means we're time traveling. Anytime we do a Powers issue, you should expect a little bit of time traveling. But we start off in this issue at year 1. And at year 1, we started off at Bar Sinister. Now, what can you say about Bar Sinister? What does that remind you of, Danny?
Well, that's the kind of thread that weaves the other Hickman arcs and big story-driven episodes of who and what all together. You get this kind of thread of him pulling on the older stuff and bringing it in to kind of flush out his universe that he's secretly building inside the Marvel mythos. And this is from Secret Wars. Like, this is a big Secret Wars nod right here, because really, as much as you want it to be a more of a Fantastic Four or like definitely like a Shield nod, you can't overlook that Secret Wars is a prevalent part in a lot of Hickman's writing, and this is his chance to bring in some more of it to kind of layer out the story and his mythos that he's also writing in tandem to the legendary X-Men mythos.
Absolutely, and that's what I love about Hickman is anytime anyone is like, because people are so overwhelmed when they want to start comics or they're introduced to comics and they don't know where to start. I start with Hickman because it's a confined world that's somewhat doable.
Yeah, it's very rare that you can find like a writer's content that like can be traced back for about a decade plus to like maybe even almost farther back than that, depending on how far he goes with this and what he does after the X-Men story. But they all connect together in their own way. It's weird. You don't see that too often. Like normally the greater story arc or the greater push is something that hijacks the story and kind of convolutes it or makes it convoluted in a abundance. But really with Hickman, it's a really cool thing. You get to see this transition of like how he's actually been able to shape the universe, because without things like Secret Wars, as much as I have my problems with it, that it allowed Hickman to be the one to control the change and keep his old stories, even bring in like the Ultimates type stuff, especially the nod you see with like how Charles does his helmet in the other issues. Like that reminds me of like the Maker and like the Ultimate series, where Professor Fantastic wore that crazy helmet. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And the Ultimates run, yeah. Like that's Hickman bringing in his other mythos in like nod form as best as he can. And even then, you could read those stories and they still tie into some of this stuff. So it's really cool that you get that, because you won't get that in a lot of other writers. They get too driven by one story that they have to make their point with because they're afraid they're going to be replaced by someone else, or they know they have a limited run. Whereas Hickman, he's just been having a great time with this for years now, and a greater story has paid off because of it, albeit burdened by editorial mandates at times. This and House, or this and Fantastic Four and other things like that have been pretty concrete, and they managed to hold up that level of what they built on that foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you see Marvel editorial's hands in a lot of these things, but at the same time, Hickman finds a way to interweave his own stories throughout all of Marvel's kind of universes, I guess you could say, which is pretty cool.
100%.
I dig it, and it gives you kind of like a jumping off point, or not even a jumping off point, but just like a tangible line to follow, because sometimes it's so hard to find a tangible point to start and to continue and to jump off of and to jump on, and comics get overwhelming for a lot of people.
Yeah, too many different narratives take it into too many different ways, too many retcons. So you can put aside all the mythos of everyone who's established over the time, and if you read just Hickman, you'll get a story about all the characters from the Marvel mythos, the X-Men mythos, the Avengers mythos that you care about. That'll all get flushed out, and you can still read a cohesive story that works out over like a decade. So you're not going to get that by like jumping from one arc to the other. Like every summer event really doesn't even connect. Like the last 3 summer events probably don't connect as well as versus the last like 8 years of Hickman writing. Like that connects better than anything that's happened recently.
For sure. Like, what was this summer event? It was Infinity Warps, and what else? What was the last one that just came out right now? That was a big tie-in event. I forgot the name of it. War of Realms.
Oh yeah.
That one's probably the bigger one, and that was just like, it was cool. It was just.
It felt more recycled. Like those types of events feel like they've been done before, though. Like the Infinity thing has been done to death. I mean, this is like Infinity the Problem Part 3, the Reckoning, the Return of the Infinity.
The Return, the Rise, and the Fall.
Infinity. Yeah, exactly. Like how many times they're gonna reuse that infinity concept until someone realizes it's either the characters of the comics are like woefully dumb and can't really figure out how to deal with this problem that keeps returning, or the writers are just too lazy to make them like competent enough to maintain a newer, not only status quo, but an evolution of the greater comic world as it progresses with those stories. And granted, the Asgardian based events are usually pretty good. Like I remember Fear Itself was a good one, and then Ragnarok was really good. And I enjoy that kind of stuff.
I love Fear Itself.
Yeah, it was cool. We got like Apocalypse, or not Apocalypse. I always do that. I always call it Colossus Apocalypse because they're just big and emboldening. But Colossus, like got to become Juggernaut. That was crazy. That was all out of the Fear Itself like storyline. That was really cool. Yeah, those things work. Very cool. And like in this current one, they're like, look at the Punisher. He's like rolling around in Asgardian like get up, and like he's wrecking all these like demons and stuff, or like these giant ice like trolls or ice giants and stuff, like a lot of mythos from like the Norse mythology. So that's kind of more of a what if kind of thing, and those stories are really never meant to, as like a what if, fit the greater narrative and the greater story that's going on throughout Marvel over like a few years. Hickman's the only one that's been doing that. That's why they tied around Secret Wars, but they put him at the helm and name at that one, and then Marvel kind of puppeted a lot of it. I mean, if you imagine how the universe would be now if they would have just took the reins off and let him like reshape the Marvel mythos from that day forward, and it had to stay that way, as opposed to how we joked. Remember, we were like, well, 2 issues after that, it all went south, and it didn't matter. So like this beautiful thing he built up just got completely overwritten. Whereas if it didn't, oh man, we would be in with this part that's going on right now. This like unveiled in this issue would have happened like probably a year or so ago, maybe even sooner.
That would have been great. Those pussyfooters. Pussyfooting Marvel editors, man. Come on, guys. I believe in you. Let the writers and artists do their thing. Trust in their work.
The good stuff will prevail. The junk will just filter out with the rest of the mediocrity. The junk always does. It'll sell good the first issue, but the longevity of the other sales will speak of what people are really enjoying.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But mediocrity aside, we're in we're Bar Sinister, and we're with Xavier and Magneto, and we're met with a Sinister clone, and they're just like, "Yo, we need to talk to Essex, Nathaniel Essex. You know the guy?" And he's like, "Yo, which one? Which one? There's a lot of us."
He's like, "Dave's not here, man."
Yeah, he's straight up. Dave's not here. Magneto.
Which Mr. Sin are you looking for? This one? Well, this one, and he just keeps moving his hand in front of his face, and he's making like different facial expressions. Yeah. And Magneto's like, "Enough of this bullshit, I'm Magneto."
And he's just like, "Enough of this shit," and he just blasts him through the wall, and it's beautiful.
This is what I was saying earlier. Like the comedy just like is interwoven between like the story progressing, and it's just perfect. This part is such a Magneto one. Like, look at that transition. 2 minutes later, Mr. Sinister Magneto's here.
Right? Like, straight up from like, "I will not do this," to, "All right, here."
Give him the speech.
Like,
Yeah.
Very comedic timing in this issue.
Yeah.
So essentially, this Sinister presents Charles and Magneto to another Sinister.
Yeah, after he gets his ear talked off by Magneto in just one really, like, I guess you could say, like, classic Magneto speech where he's like, "This is how we're going to deal with this situation.
Yeah.
I'm here for business with the real Sinister, or at least the head honcho Sinister in this kind of transition."
He's like, "Enough of this. Take me to your leader now. We're not going to deal with this." So we go to another Sinister, and the Sinister is very, very like comedic, and he's very almost Deadpool-like. He's just all like, "You have a cape. That's a cool cape. Why don't I have a cape?" And then his butler Sinister is just all like, "Oh, I always thought you should have a cape." And he's all like, "Wait, you always thought that? Why didn't you tell me? Execute this guy now."
It was so weird. Is they're all just Mr. Sinister and his clones, and I guess maybe there are some other Sinisters there that are from an alternate dimension, maybe, because this is all kind of tying. Like, it seems like that's what they're hinting at with like the references to Secret Wars, but I don't know. It's such a weird character portrayal of Mr. Sinister, and you think it's a front, but then you're like, this can't be actual Mr. Sinister, and then something happens, but then it's still the same portrayal that goes on. Like, this is a new era for Mr. Sinister. I think they're trying to make him more, I guess, stand out as a character. And so they changed his persona in a way to make him easier to recognize as an individual. Because he's kind of that, he's menacing and he's a scientist and he's sinister, as his name states. But, like, his actual, I guess you could say, persona or character mannerisms are sometimes hard to pinpoint when you're trying to remember him and like reference him. Like, I just know he's just always like doing that menace, that like, Sinister. I could combine the DNA of all these different mutants and make super mutants. And it's just like, dude, we can hear you talking. But yeah, this is definitely a new type of Sinister that I would be weird at first and like I wouldn't get used to, but like after a few like different panels, I was like, okay, I like that this is his default going forward.
Yeah, agreed. I've heard people say that this is classic Sinister, this weird comedic Sinister, but I don't think that's true, right?
We could be biased. Like,
we could.
The show did kind of portray what I view as Mr. Sinister. The animated X-Men series from the 90s, like that had like with Apocalypse and a lot of characters, like that had this ingraining impact that kind of left a long-lasting view of Mr. Sinister. But he had his moments of being kind of a little crass and like snide and like almost like cheeky, but not this like I want to say this colorful or like flamboyant.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a different approach, for sure.
Definitely.
And essentially, the Sinister talks, and he's like, "Yo, what up?" And Magneto's like, "We know that you are cataloging every human's DNA. And what we want you to do is to do the same thing, but for mutant DNA." And essentially, what happens is the Sinister does not tolerate any of this. And he will not have mutant DNA saved in his databases. And as he's saying this, he's instantly shot, and we're met with another Sinister.
A more classic looking, iconic Mr. Sinister.
A more classic, iconic. He's got that flare. He's got that collar.
That crazy popping collar with his weird frilly cape. Those frills, man, they're so frilly.
And he's like you said, you hinted at this earlier. Like you think that this is just like, oh, it's because it's a different Sinister, but we're met with this Sinister, and he's still like comedic and very like quippy and quirky, and he's like, "Psst, hey, it's me, the real one."
Yeah,
but
has that Deadpool feel, just like you said, like it's very Deadpool.
It's weird, but this is interesting. He says, "It's me, the Sinister with the mutant genes," hinting that he is now a mutant. Now, he's never been a mutant, really. He's gotten his genes were altered from Apocalypse originally, correct?
Yeah, he was just a scientist that was researching in mutant and mutation, and kind of in a way that like many people along Charles and Beast and Moira, or even closer to Moira actually, both of them
I would say
were just
Moira.
Mutant researchers of different timelines. Like he's like a Victorian era mutant researcher, and he was modified into I guess you could say a super being, a super powered human. And that was something done by Apocalypse, kind of in the way that he did it to Ozymandias, like the weird like stone like henchman that he had. Like that dude used to be like an actual pharaoh, and then he beat him, and he was like, "You're just gonna be my lackey till the end of time," and he just turned him super powered. Like that's all. He's not like a mutant proper, and neither was Sinister in any way. And that was kind of the thing, is he was like the mad scientist human. Like he was a really good villain for the X-Men, being like a mad scientist human trying to experiment on their uniqueness, because that's an interesting field to write into. You could do the human versus machine, but what about if the mutant versus machine, but what about if you break down like the science, like the chemistry, the research versus mutant? Like what if that kind of thing comes from it? And that was really Mr. Sinister's origin and how his character was developed over many years. This kind of puts him into like a different realm. He's a mutant. He's kind of got what I feel is more of a Deadpool like persona and less of a traditional Sinister, even in the older stuff type persona. And it's a new realm. But I mean, like I said, Moira wasn't a mutant, and now she is, and Sinister is too, so let's see where this goes. And I like his. You see what his mutant power is?
Yes, we'll get to that. We will get to that.
Well, like how he brings it up, he's like, mutant power is like overthrowing tyrants and being the absolute fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, it's great. It's great. So essentially, Charles does what he does best, and he's like, "Yo, look into my brain." And it is assumed that the deal has been made, and that Sinister will hold this database of all mutant DNA. Now, this is important. This is going to be a very important thing coming up in the future, knowing that we have, it's a piece of the puzzle, let's just say. And we have a couple pieces in place so far. We have this database, and we have Cerebro, which we learn more about in next issue, I believe, of Powers of X.
Correct.
And we'll soon learn about more mutants that'll help and fit into this puzzle. But for now, we cut to essentially it's called the Red Diamond, which is just gossip at Bar Sinister, and there's these sinister secrets, and
They're weird.
ultimately they're weird. They're just
Yeah.
random. They're quirky. But the biggest takeaway is that he got his power from Thunderbird. What do you know about Thunderbird other than he's the Indian mutant superhero?
I know little about Thunderbird, but enough to like pretty much break it down like this. Thunderbird was original, it was probably one of the most forgettable, but one of the original giant-sized X-Men Claremont era, like X-Men class renditions. So that team had Thunderbird on it, and that team also had Wolverine on it, and that's the problem, is that Marvel editorial thought that Wolverine and Thunderbird were too similar, and so they killed off Thunderbird, and Thunderbird pretty much stopped being relevant 100% in like a short time frame. Like in that run, like when they're introduced, like it's probably like 69 issues later, 68 maybe or something in the 60s, I think is when Thunderbird dies, and then it's just forgotten until later, which I learned about Thunderbird later because I read X-Force in like the late 2000s, and that had Warpath, his brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, like when his brother was introduced as like a member, and Warpath was literally just the same as Thunderbird. It was just he was a younger, more violent and angry version. And he's introduced like earlier on in the X-Men mythos, so he was pretty canonical up to that point when they introduced him. So I was like, okay, this is cool. And they just had him going around with like I guess like just daggers and just murdering people, and it was really intense stuff, but great for X-Force with a team like Wolverine and like X-23 and Wolfsbane and stuff like that. Shit, Archangel was even there. They were a great team, but they were all just like people made with sharp objects for cutting. This is a pretty gory like stuff, but that's the mythos that I remember the most of Thunderbird. It's his brother. Like I know less about Thunderbird, and he's an original Claremont like class of X-Men, and his brother gets more memory and like screen time. And you know something also funny going on later is that you notice they take the time to like do certain things to like fix stuff from the past. Thunderbird gets no love in the future. Like in the future,
No.
they forgot about him, and they kept him forgotten. They were just like, no. And I wonder what that is. Is it because he's a Native American like superhero that's called Thunderbird? Maybe they feel that's too
Offensive or something?
offensive. Like it's too. I
Could
don't.
be.
But I mean, they have Shang-Chi, which is just like he's just an Asian
He's a-
martial artist dude. So
He's straight up Bruce Lee, a knockoff
yeah,
Bruce Lee.
yeah, he's just a knockoff Bruce Lee. So I don't know. Maybe that's because you could point to Bruce Lee and say that that's clear enough, and I'm just like, I guess. But you read the older Shang-Chi stuff, and they're just like doing generic, like martial arts like parody, or
Yeah.
or not lampoon, pastiche.
It's all just homages to like these old Hong Kong films.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, well, and what's the problem with Thunderbird? Like, you know what Thunderbird did remind me of I can't remember what his name was, but he was in the first Predator movie. He was the guy that was part of Arnold's like crew, and he was the dude who just had like the giant knife, and he
Apache? I
Apache,
think his
yeah.
name was Apache.
Yeah, I think that was the nickname they gave him. They just called him Apache. There you go. It just said Thunderbird. The Thunderbird guy from but they're really generic naming because they're like, well, like Apache Chief. Like,
Apache Chief.
it's the same. It's ridiculous. They're like no creativity. They're just like your native names are good enough. They're fascinating enough for
Yeah.
us westernized society. Yeah. But that was always my image of him, is like he's like a badass ready to fight with just a knife. He doesn't need really much else than that.
Yeah, pretty
But
much. He has super strength. His powers are. Hold on. There's super strength, stamina, dense tissue, durability, superhuman respiration. That'd be nice to have.
Yeah, he could just jog for a really long time.
Although, if you have superhuman respiration, would you like not be able to get high, or would you have to like consume so much cannabis to get high?
It's like that weird Superman issue where like Wolverine, like how does Wolverine get drunk? Like doesn't his body just regenerate his liver tissue fast enough where any like degradation or like any like imbibement of alcohol is just filtered so fast?
Right. Is that why? But that's probably why he's drinking fast. So you
Maybe,
get drunk fast.
but he's
Still
like
not working. Still
he's
not working.
he's chasing that minute of being drunk.
It's like a second. You get like 2 seconds before
I
it
was drunk there
heals.
for a moment.
I got a
I'm so
moment.
sad.
Oh, I had the thoughts. The thoughts went away.
But yeah, so they nixed him because they thought he was too similar to Wolverine. That was pretty funny. But apparently that's what ties into Sinister being a mutant. But I mean,
So
Deadpool's not a
still-
mutant, and he's got a similar con. It seems like that's more like the Deadpool origin again. Like it feels like they're trying to Deadpool Sinister in a way. I don't know, or kind of give him a weird Deadpool kind of sheen or palette, if you will.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't know.
It's very
It's an
strange.
interesting take. I'm curious to see more for sure. But yeah, so knowing that Sinister is a mutant, knowing that he's collecting, what do you think on knowing that we know now without giving too much away?
Uh-huh.
I guess we can't talk about it without giving it away. So let's just move forward. Actually,
Yeah, so some of the stuff later on is being built right now, and yeah, it would definitely spoil some of the weird twists because things do get weird.
things get
Like
weird. Yeah.
Like I said, with Hickman's writing, things get thrown up in the air, and when the arc ends, they don't come back down. They just keep going up. He just throws the whole world on its side and just leaves it there. Turns it all on its side. It's a real good ending still, but yeah, things are gonna get more confusing. You will have more questions. I promise you that.
You will, but have patience. We will discuss this. But moving forward, we're gonna go to X X to the first power. Now usually this is 10 years in the future, but in this instance it's just months ago instead
Yeah.
of 10 years ago. And we're met with the professor and Douglas Ramsey. Now, Douglas Ramsey is essentially he could decipher codes and languages, and apparently there was an instance where he ran into Warlock, which is a techno-organic alien that fused and is now a part of his right arm.
Yeah, you could say Warlock is Douglas's right hand man.
Right.
Oh Jesus.
Ooh,
Oh.
nice. You went there. All right.
Yeah,
This
but
is true,
literally.
though. Literally.
That might cause.
Literally.
I wonder was Douglas right-handed? Like, does this make a really awkward relationship for them?
Right? Which
the implication is definitely questionable.
what is he? Is he right-handed or left-handed? Does that affect him in his masturbation practices?
Yes, that was the implication.
I can't do this. Fuck, I gotta retrain myself with my other hand now.
or maybe like Warlock objects to it. Self thinks this is awkward. He always talks in like the weird like what's his second person or something like that.
Yeah.
He's a very strange character, Warlock. But yeah, Doug's a pretty weird character too. But after they rebooted him, because like I didn't know too much about him either until like Necrotia when they brought him back during like it was like back in like 2010 during that arc. But they brought back all that stuff. So yeah, like when they reintroduced him, they made him a lot more interesting too, because he was really lame up until that point, just being able to decipher anything. You think that's cool, but it's not as cool as when they resurrected him, and now he could read the language of everything in a weird way. Like, he could read body language, so if you're trying to fight him, he can read your movements and understand you. Kind of like how, what is it, Taskmaster, right?
Yes.
The one who's like, he has like
Very
that
much
muscle
like
memory.
Taskmaster.
Yeah, so he can do that. He can like use the kind of to his advantage, and he can like read the language of like was it some sort of electromagnetic like waves and stuff just being presented in a light where like humans can't even understand it. He's like, well, I could break it down where I can understand how it even speaks to me, and it made him way more versatile. Where it used to just be like he was their Google Translate that just came around with them. It was like, oh, what does this say? And he's like, I got this. Give me a minute. And it just kind of went from there. Now he's like part like cyborg, which is always a cool, like him being fused with Warlock is an old kind of card for them. They've always done that, but now him being more of a permanent one and not that weird amalgamation of like Douglock, because that they had like a weird persona and it was very unnatural. Now this just feels like it's Doug running the show and he's got a cool Warlock arm, and that's it. I was like, I like that. It gives him more ability and more flair, and he's definitely a force to be reckoned with. Like the new era Cypher is like top tier mutant instead of like low at best. Right. And look how British Charles, like Charles is so British looking like this. I feel like he came from an African colony in like 1912.
He's ready to shoot a lion right now for sure.
Yes, like it looks like, what was it? Van Pelt from Jumanji.
Yeah.
Like Douglas rolled like something wrong, and then he released Charles.
Yeah.
I dig that. I do dig that. I mean, it's like, I get it. He's British, but like this is him being like embracing his.
This is embracing it way too much. This is going overboard.
But you can respect that, because how do you convey a very British concept without that accent? Usually, it's the accent that.
Yeah, you gotta express it visually.
Gives away like how British a character is and how like the mannerisms that go with their inflections and the little things. Even reading it, you like can read their like unique slang and dialect, but reading it in your mind, it's hard to hear it in that British way. But when I look at him like that, it's a very British image. Like that is a very like your imperial style, old school British like colonial traveler type getup, and that's a very nice aesthetic. I mean, kudos. Was it R.B. Sylvia did this, right? Because it's Powers, so yeah, it should be Sylvia. So kudos to him for like finding a way to for finding a way to translate the British aesthetic into a visual representation.
Yes, and essentially, Douglas is just kind of like fucking off right now, and Charles kind of like is like, yo, get it together, yo, hang out. Or not.
Come with me. We're exploring.
We're exploring. Let's do this. And as they go off, this is one thing I didn't notice the first time I read this. I noticed this when I was doing research for this podcast. As they're going off, you see Charles go off, and you see Douglas's hand, and he just touches Krakoa, and you see it get infected. And I did not notice this the first time. Did you notice that?
Like he like transitioned some of the like the techno organic virus from his hand.
Yes.
I honestly thought that was one of those things that was like him trying to infiltrate like the area and understand it. I don't know if that was necessarily something like I noticed it, but I didn't think it was anything nefarious. But now that you pointed out to me again, I almost start to think that, and with the stuff they've been talking about with the technoarchy and how like a lot of the infection and ascension works in the different timelines, I almost feel like that maybe would have been a Hickman nod, writing like or revealing earlier on to us what some greater stories might be going on in like the background. And this might be one of them, is that Douglas is slowly but surely betraying everyone, and he's a part of it. He's already been assimilated in a weird way. I mean, that would be a real big twist, and like I'd be surprised if that happens, because maybe it is something more nefarious and not so much just him trying to like put out a feeler to the surrounding area so he can understand where he is and what's going on. Because I mean, wouldn't you do that if you could like connect with the surroundings and just talk to nature as you're chilling with it? Like just hanging out in nature, you could just tap into it with your like weird two-way communication techno-organic virus.
Oh yeah, I'm spreading my techno-organic AIDS to everyone for sure. I'm everywhere. Just you get it, you get it, you get it. Yeah, everyone gets it for sure.
A little bit of fun on everyone.
Yeah.
I was hoping you would use it in more of a just a way to better understand things, but I guess you could say, yeah, you could kind of just everybody gets a little bit. You're essentially Kurt Russell in the Marvel universe, in the comic Marvel universe, as opposed to cinematic. Oh, what a weird plot that movie went down.
Yeah, right.
Oh man, James Gunn, what are you gonna do? That guy's all left field.
Throwing them curveballs, like literally in that film, they threw a ball.
Yeah, like a blue ball on the curve. But we're gonna have to really keep an eye out for like if there's any more, because I don't remember any other like actual moments where he tried to make that obvious. Like I feel like this was the one nod that they're gonna reveal right now, and if this ever plays like a greater role, this was like our one tell.
Right. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up though, because like I totally dismissed it. It was like, oh, that's just the thing he does. Like he's part techno organic, so he just kind of leaves a bit of himself wherever he goes to kind of just connect with it.
Exactly, but you don't show something like that for no reason, and Hickman seems like he's pointing a nod to the future, which in the future, I guess, because they have the future Krakoa, which is the in year 100, which we saw in the past, right?
Yeah, where Doug's dead and Krakoa just pilots his body, like
He pilots his body, yeah.
he's like, I'm gonna use
Pretty
this.
much.
Douglas is done. Cypher has moved on, and he's not gonna need this. I will just put it inside me and walk off. I was like, how was that funeral? Like, were people just like, whoa? Krakoa really misses Doug. He's hugging him. Oh wait, no, he's shoving it inside his chest. Oh, he's leaving.
What?
Oh wow.
It's a weird ceremony.
Yeah. I have a feeling. Oh. This is getting good.
He didn't even wait for like the hors d'oeuvres to like come out before he did that. At least wait for the snacks, man.
Yeah. Let his mom go home. Jeez. His mother was right there.
It's right there. So maybe this plays a part in that. I don't know, but maybe it plays into a more mischievous part. We'll find out in the future. But as they keep walking, they're met with a head, and it's the head of Krakoa. And it's just, what's up? I'm an island. How's it going? It's kind of like a more like chill, more stoned, more like keeping with the vibes version of the Sentinel head and the master and the mother mold. It's like, yo, what's up? How's it going?
I was just thinking that. I was like, he was like the antithesis to it, like the yin and yang kind of situation. You have your giant robot Sentinel head, and then in contrast on the other side, you have your giant wooden tree head. I want to see them talk and like have an argument. It would have been great, but missed opportunity.
Right. Let me see that one shot.
Yeah. Who knows? Moira always has more lives.
It could be always another time. Yeah. So essentially,
crazy backstory.
Yeah, Douglas Ramsey's brought here to decipher the language of Krakoa, and it's kind of speaking to him, and it's kind of cool how Hickman does this. It's like drawn and like a weird, like it's not the Krakoan language, but it's kind of a weird language, but it's kind of droopy, although it's like dying halfway through. So it's like trying to communicate to Ramsey, which is pretty cool. I like how they communicate that visually.
Yeah, there's like a weird way of like dialogue conveyed into transitional image and like emotion kind of backed into it, so it's a little deeper than just like him like when you read someone's mind and you just go for the base information, you're just getting that, but it feels like he's not only reading through it, but he's like feeling it in a way, like feeling the history like play out of like what Krakoa has to offer. Like the history, the weird mythos that is this tree and island creature.
Exactly, and essentially, like Charles is like, I'm using my telepathy, and I think it's saying hi, and Cypher is pretty much like, are you sure about that? I'm not sure. Let me read into that more. He might be saying something else.
Yeah, he's doing surface stuff, just like barely touching, like skirting the waters.
Yeah, he's skirting the waters. It's suggesting that Charles can't like crack Krakoa. and he thinks that so this is what Cypher's brought here to do. This is what he could do. He's here to do what Charles can't, which is communicate with Krakoa. And he touches Krakoa, and we find out like this weird backstory behind Krakoa, where it's like once he touches it, he sees the beginning, which is like we are Akara, the one land. And then the Twilight Sword tore through the world, and it became two. And Akara became Arako and Krakoa. And then demons came out into the world. And
such a metal like origin story, my God.
Right? Can we talk about like do you know like can we touch on like do you know if because I might be missing something here. Is the Twilight Sword referencing something?
The only time I've ever heard the Twilight Sword referenced in anything else Marvel is that sword that Surtur has in like the Asgardian mythos for like the Marvel stuff. Like he has that, but that doesn't seem like that's what this is.
It doesn't.
Unless that this is like a retcon to that, but I don't think so. It seems like this is much more of a just a coincidental naming brought in on this more unique origin story. Yeah, because I was like looking through a lot of this concept here, and I was like, is this just like completely out there on its own? Like this is really weird. Krakoa is far more complex than I ever thought. I thought it was just a weird mutant that got turned into an island, but apparently no, it's way more than that.
Yeah, like I imagine
the old gods and shit.
I imagine like the moment that Douglas Ramsey touched Krakoa, you just hear like the double drum, the double bass from like a metal band, just like it's just like Twilight Sword.
Like the wailing of like the guitar plays in, and then it just like starts bringing up all this fire, and like this really like epic metal music video plays out, and he's just like, holy shit. He's like out of breath after he's done like looking at it. He's like, oh my God.
God, it was so metal.
He's like, I don't want to put any more of my techno virus on you. I'm taking it back.
Yeah.
You've been some places.
I'm done for a night. But yeah, so he touches he learns this Twilight Sword tears it in two, becomes Arako and Krakoa. And then demons spew out into the world. And then these demons pretty much take over the entire world. And the world would have been consumed by these demons if it were not for the purple, the blue man.
The god in blue.
The god in blue, if you will. Apocalypse. Saved the world. And they pushed Arako through the chasm, leaving Krakoa alone. He was cut in half. So he doesn't feel whole. So essentially Xavier was all like, I think he said hello. And then Cypher was like, nah, man. He's all like, I've been cut in half and I'm like lonely as fuck.
Yeah, like the best he picked up was he's like, I think he might be sad. Maybe. I'm not sure. And then he like goes through this like crazy thing. And he's like, oh, man. This thing is broken, like literally, like emotionally and physically broken. All right, so when we left off, I was saying the Apocalypse panel is pretty awesome when you look at it. It is a very well drawn and just very epic Apocalypse heavy metal style panel with a lot of his artwork kind of still laying towards his Egyptian roots, because the swords he's dual wielding there, that's very like Egyptian falchion scimitar style swords. So that kind of has like his little mythos tied into it, but just overall the very heavy metal look of the demons coming out
in the background.
The lightning striking. Yes, exactly. The lightning is perfect. I know that when Arve Silver was doing this, he was like, we gotta have lightning. There's got to be lightning back here. We're just gonna get it made. There's like 4 lightning bolts striking, not even, well, I guess one splitting in the center, but still, it's like, it looks like he's surrounded by like the 4 lightning bolts coming down, and then they have that nice little panel cut of his four horsemen there, kind of showing more about the story that Apocalypse was here, dealing with that huge issue that happened with Krakoa when the splitting happened all those hundreds of years ago, thousands, I guess, at this point. But yeah. That was a really cool little. That's probably going to be one of my big takeaway moments from the whole issue. Is this one page right here? Just so awesome. It could be a wallpaper, or even like a poster, like a framed art. Shit, I'd even keep the weird part of it with Douglas at the bottom where he looks confused. It almost complements it. Like I could really keep it as all or as is in its entirety, but you just get the nice little like the little last bit of tidbit to Apocalypse's history with a lot of this. You get that little shot of him standing over the moon and just looking like menacing like he does. Very foreboding, but all great imagery and a nice little transition and a nice little bit of flavor history for Apocalypse and Krakoa as one.
Yes. So after that, we move to Douglas and Professor moving back towards
Colonial Xavier.
Colonial Xavier, yes.
The bloody imperialist.
Imperialists alike. He's heading back to the ship, and he's just all like, yo, you like it out here? He's like, I like it out here. You like it out here? He's like, I like it out here. You want to stay out here?
He's like, sure.
He's like, yeah, I'm down. I'm interested. What's the gig? And, you know, the professor is all about showing, not telling.
Yeah, they've already set a precedence with Moira and him where they're like, let's get everyone up to speed quick. Let's skip all the exposition. Douglas, you get that freebie too. Here you go. What?
Boom. And then bam, he has all the knowledge. We are to assume he has all the knowledge that we have up to this point at least.
Or all the knowledge that the professor deems necessary for him to do the job they need him for Krakoa.
Sure.
Like they pretty much have established a lot of. I mean, because he is by de facto on more important levels with the inner workings of Krakoa, especially when it comes to like the secret council that runs things. So when you get into that kind of stuff and you find out more about like how that's going to work, you see why he needs to know a lot, because Douglas is going to play a very important role from this point forward. And he's on board. He's super interested about it. He's jazzed. He's like, yeah, I'm becoming a relevant character. I got this cool arm upgrade that's like quasi warlock, and now I've been like taking a crash course on like Krakoan history through Charles's weird mind like update.
Yeah. So he's on board. Professor's like, great. Tosses him a bag, and Douglas is just like, wait, now? I gotta do this now? And Professor just bails. He's like, yep, bitch, bailing. Bye.
Get to work. I like that little scene, that panel. You just him from his tiny little personal Blackbird, just throwing the bag, not even handing it. Get to work, Douglas. You want to be important? You have to earn it.
Right.
And then Professor's out.
He is, but he also states that the professor's like, how long is it going to take? And he's like, maybe a couple months, a year. He doesn't know. And remember, this is year 0, not year 1. So this is the year leading up to year 1. We are
exactly.
Building
this is
up.
still, yeah, the build up of the groundwork to Krakoa being like more of an actual functioning nation. Like this is still in its infancy. That's why Professor's dressed as such an explorer. He's trying to go through, and he's trying to explore and colonize new lands, and Krakoa is his first choice.
A mutant that is an island? My natural inclination is to colonize it, of course.
Get me my hat.
Give me my hat. And we move on to the current Krakoan systems, which is an interface built by Douglas Ramsey himself, which is a translation program so that other mutants can interact with the island without needing Cypher to act as a like to go in between, pretty much.
As like the they didn't try to stretch him too thin. He tries to compartmentalize a lot of the little things in the island. As many corporations would create little compartmentalizations within themselves, they do the same as the Krakoan hierarchy of their lifeline and infrastructure and their security system, their communication system, their surveillance. All of that is created in a unique way through Douglas as the conduit between it all, but other people kind of picking up the more important duties so he doesn't get stretched too thin.
Yes, exactly. And we have, I guess we'll start from the left. We have transit and moderating, which is Sage.
Yeah. Sage the supercomputer.
Sage the supercomputer, yes.
Which
Then,
is... Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say, Sage is a weird character because in many ways you could misinterpret Sage as being kind of a weird version of Douglas, being as
Right.
analytical and kind of a supercomputer, or in many ways kind of like how Forge works too, being his innate super intelligence that kind of comes from his mutant powers. But Sage I find is a little more unique. She's a Chris Claremont creation that kind of over the years has been fleshed out to be a lot cooler than she really was. She started out like Doug, very rudimentary, but now she's gone on to be also a little more effective in countermeasures to psychic threats. So I guess Xavier spent a lot of time trying to train her to be a perfect counter to any psychic force that could try to attack her or any people around her, i.e. Krakoa in general. She has like a natural computer psychic system that's built to like counter any type of psychic intrusion and things along the lines of that. But she also is able to pick up, she has other mutations, like she's able to pick up on like mutants, their like DNA or signatures. She can jumpstart mutant powers. She can also advance mutant powers, so give them like a secondary evolution or mutation. She has like all these weird little unique abilities that don't get brought up unless for like plot devices, but as a character on the whole, like she's really impressive. Like as they've been doing with Cypher lately, they're fleshing out their like the full spectrum of their abilities. And seeing Sage here on monitoring makes sense. Like Sage is a cool one for monitoring since she can multitask, she can do all these other things at once and just be stretched, all over on communication. She also can prevent against psychic intrusions and also help with like who is a mutant and who isn't and a lot of that stuff. So that's where we start, is with Sage right there, just for the transit and monitoring system. But basically, she is like a weird mutant version of the NSA. But essentially, yes.
Moving on from the NSA, we go to like the Rumsfeld of it all. We go defense and observation. Then we got Black Tom Cassidy here. What do you think about Black Tom Cassidy?
Well, that's Sean Cassidy's brother, which is Banshee, who is that, the iconic giant size X-Men era crew. Like the Black Tom Cassidy was kind of like a foil because Sean Cassidy essentially existed. Just kind of like how they did with Havoc and Cyclops, They did the whole brother like struggle. It's a good plot to write, but Black Tom Cassidy as a whole is always kind of like a real weak and weird character because he could take wood and channel like kinetic energy through it and blast you with it, and it was always really dumb. And I know at one point he got like injured by Cable, and then they had to like fuse like wood to his body, which then gave him a new mutation where he was like resilient and more sturdy because he's like part wood, like part organic tree kind of, and he could channel his energy through his body now because he doesn't have to like use a shillelagh or something. Like he could just, he's very Scottish, very Scottish. Yeah. It's almost comical. Like he's almost like a trope. Like what is the most iconic Scottish like villain in comics? I'd be like, oh, Black Tom easily. He's just, his weapon is a shillelagh. So they like circumvent that and they start to make him a little more interesting. But like I didn't know really much about him until like some of the newer stuff they start to play with in these like stuff that comes out after House and Powers, and that's where they really flesh him out. But from that point forward, before all that, like he was kind of dumb. Like he was a weird like character. He made no sense even when they kind of upgraded him. I guess at some point, and I've never read really that story, he gets like a new mutation that's like the evolution of what they started, and he can control plants like and communicate with them and all this other crazy stuff. But that's stuff that they touch on later on, and the stuff in the past I've never really read about it. So Black Tom's always been kind of like a throwaway villain that's just not really as pragmatic or prevalent. So it's interesting to see him in charge of defense. Like the first thing you'd be like, well, Black Tom get defeated all the time. Like why would he be in charge of defense? Like he's a failure. Like, I don't get it, but hey, this is a new era and this is some new stuff. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do with it. And I definitely know people are going to be excited to see him when he actually shines. It'll be a surprise for all of us.
Chlorokinesis is the ability to mentally control plant within the vicinity of you.
Okay,
Yes.
like kind of like telekinesis or like whatever geokinesis, like controlling the earth. It's just, but that's like a plant limited specific one, or
I
like
guess so.
pyrokinesis for
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. But moving on from defense and observation, we go to secondary external systems, and that is trinary. Trinary, probably, hooking in, tapping into all the, which we've seen. We saw this a little bit in House of X issue 4. She taps into all these satellites to be able to transmit telepathic signals for Charles and other telepaths throughout the world and in space, which is cool.
Yeah, but I mean, her true shining grace is that, and her most powerful mutant ability is that she can be Apocalypse's #1 secretary.
Yes.
Trinary is the best secretary you could ever have. She kills it. Like
She's killing it. Always
she
on
knows
time.
what coffee you want.
Yes.
Always on time. Exactly.
And everything's
Unstoppable.
Uber's there exactly right when you need it to be. Everything.
You'll
Perfect.
never miss a board meeting again if you got Trinary on your crew. But yeah, that's secondary systems, like external analysis is really what Trinary pretty much holds. She's like the spectrums of like she's like a communications and television for like Krakoa. Their internet's down, it's on Trinary. They're like, hey man, like I'm trying to stream some stuff. Like I don't understand Trinary. You have one job. You need to get on this. But yeah, that's pretty much in a joking way. That's really what Trinary is the Wi-Fi.
Oh yeah. Moving on from the Wi-Fi, we go to Overwatch data analysis, and that is Beast, your boy Beast.
Beast, man, that the classic X-Men right there. Awesome, Fraser Crane.
Fraser Crane.
Kelsey Grammer in the fur. They got him his data analysis, which is interesting because Beast has that engineering side, but his engineering always used to seem like it was in more like bioengineering, and he was always like a biogeneticist and like things along those lines, because it always his mutations came from him like tampering with himself, and that's what turned him blue and all that kind of stuff. So seeing him here as just data analysis, I wonder if they're talking about like data in a more biological sense, or like I don't know. And Overwatch, like, does that just mean he's like an extra set of eyes, or was he really into computer gaming? Like, I don't understand. Is that he just really likes Overwatch? I don't know.
Right.
It's weird.
Yeah, he's just into Overwatch.
Yeah, like I don't understand what role Beast is going to play based off of those, but I'm interested to see how they flesh that out, because they seem to have done a good job, at least with Sage and Trinary in their roles, and from what I've seen in later issues, Black Tom definitely holds it down. So, but Beast, not so much. Every time he's introduced in the newer issues, it's so far it seems like Beast has been very aloof and like kind of plot device character, not too much as like something that holds the background, mechanics together. More so just someone there, kind of riding the wave. But we'll see.
His decisions have been iffy after his decision to bring past X-Men into the future timeline. Should he be trusted with such data analysis, I wonder?
That's true too, but then that was like they wrote Beast terribly. That was in the arc or the time frame, the Dark Years, if you will, where they were trying to write all the X-Men characters out of the norm of which you would expect them. Like, I don't know if they're doing it purposely or they're just trying something radical, but Beast was out of character, Wolverine was out of character, Cyclops, everyone made no sense. And past Beast thought, or from the main timeline, Beast thought, like, hey, I'll bring the X-Men from the past to fix the future, because then we could be reminded of what it's like, dude, you could have just pulled out a photo album and sat people down and talked. Like, you didn't have to like time displace people just to fix the it's such a weird, just, I don't know, not even a red herring, like a white elephant. Like, it's a white elephant where it's more expensive to upkeep than it's worth. Like, that's not worth it. You're gonna fuck with time in a grander cable sense just to fix the current timeline. Like, don't you realize you could be undoing like great moments in history that could affect your timeline or other people's timelines. But he doesn't care because he's Beast. He just like, I could do it. I'm Beast. I'm an old X-Men. I'm OG. Charles Xavier's not running around. Cyclops is like gone crazy. Jean Grey's gone. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do whatever I want. There's no one to rein me in. He does.
Sure. Charles wasn't around during those times.
Yeah, I think he was dead at that time frame.
Yeah,
that was
dead,
yeah, because Cyclops KO'd him when he was one of the weird Phoenix like characters or Phoenix Force members.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Trusted Beast is a bit of a gamble. He's been kind of shoddy over the last like decade or so, and he turned himself into a monster. Like he used to just be a dude with big hands and feet. Now he's just like a blue monster because of his own like tampering.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Hickman also mentions that there is a skunkwork, possibly may or may not be in development, and that Forge may not be busy building biological machines that could possibly be used to manage a mutant expansion on the island.
Yeah.
So,
that's cool because he was also helping with the original. You saw with the original development for the new Cerebro plans and how he wants to use Cerebro moving forward. So I assume after he got done with that and that got integrated, he went on to be like, all right, Forge, let's expand upon this and create something more technologically diverse within the island.
Yeah,
and I get what that they're alluding to. I would down to see what else Forge. Every time Forge turns out an invention, it's always something crazy. We'll see.
Yes, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But moving forward, we move to X-Men Year 1000, and we're
the world of tomorrow.
The world of tomorrow, if you will. And we're met with the Oji-san, elder lady, and the Phalanx, and they give them their ball of information, if you will, a ball of all the data, and this data contains a code, essentially. And this code lets the people know that their information has been added to the ascended, I guess, the ascension.
Yeah, they basically within the concept of what they were putting forth is that it wasn't any form of trickery or try to misleading, but they really wanted to understand was that it was getting absorbed in what is now inside the Phalanx when they basically become one with it. And so that data ball was what I kind of felt was like if they digitized themselves and put themselves in a digital format inside a device, and then that device was absorbed by the Phalanx, are they still in there, or is it now, does it cease to be? And the code that is kind of like the linking chain, the code that only the digital version of the Elder and the Elder should know. So if the Phalanx now knows it, then the Phalanx has now integrated itself with the Elder in the digital format in that sphere. Which is convoluted. It's really convoluted, but I get what they're doing. They're trying to see if it ceases to be or if it becomes like, is it just raw data or is it like the individual data that they could look at and point to and be like, inside the Phalanx is me. There is a version of me inside them now, a digital version, and the Phalanx can now reference it. It's not just one blurred in with the mini storage, like blank raw data. It's actual written, like individual programmed AI inside now the fucking Phalanx that the Phalanx now pull up whenever it wants, just like you could pull up a program in a computer, which is interesting. I like what they're doing. I like they want to become gods, they want to ascend, but they're just putting their toes in the water. They're just barely getting in.
They're dipping their toes right now. Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah,
I don't know.
That's pretty much what's happening.
Yeah, and they're still talking this over with their little Nimrod. Floating Nimrod tools.
They're Nimrod assistants that everyone in the future has. Like iPhones have been replaced by Nimrods, so
yeah,
you just got. That's actually the Nimrod 12 just came out. It's thinner, but if you put it in your back pocket, it'll bend. So be careful.
Be careful. Yeah, you gotta make sure you get that Nimrod care for sure. You need Nimrod care for sure. That shit breaks easily. Smart as fuck, but. Man, it's weak. Breaks.
They don't
cracks.
Apparently, in the future, they don't have any high polymer materials to make their phones out. Put a man on the moon, but we couldn't make a non-bending phone. What do you know? But yeah, they were able to reference that information is now inside Nimrod, and they're kind of like, okay, well, this is, or not Nimrod, in the Phalanx, and they're kind of like talking about it amongst themselves while Nimrod's kind of listening in on it, and they're kind of like, all right, well, do we want ascension? And the Phalanx are like waiting their response, but I like how they fuse into what I consider like their default form, which is like that floating spherical body of just like, it looks like a menacing star of like symbiotic energy mixed with like I don't know, a sun almost. It's like a techno symbiote fused with the sun or something. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just a real cool visual. But yeah, that's what it would be. Is like it's if the symbiote from Spider-Man was really into like techno and fused with the sun. It's pretty cool. It's a very good visual, like to show how they're, even though there were 3 of them there, they still function as one giant symbiotic being. I think they just do them more bipedal forms for the creatures they're interacting with.
Yes.
To kind of begin the
they just take that shape to make it the communication
contact. Yeah, for the contact.
easier for sure. And then they go into their base mode. I call it their base mode, where like they just become that ball, and they're all like, all right, I'm gonna drop the bass and just like a Nolan movie or something.
Yeah, they're floating. They're like a floating head. They're like, show me what you got. The humans are like, I don't know, what do we do? They're still sketched about it because they're like, oh man, are we gonna cease to be, or are we gonna become? But it seems like they're down. They're just like, all right, let's try to ascend. Because they just start getting eaten by. You just see those people in the background as they're getting absorbed into the Phalanx. It looks kind of rough, and I like this nonchalant conversation between like the librarian and the other like member of their organization, as they're just like having a very deep existential conversation as they're like people are being absorbed into this computerized mechanized demi being. They're thinking about themselves and the idea of self and the individual, and like, does it really matter? Is it the contrast of like, if it's a digital copy of me, isn't it still me? If it remembers all the things I remember and all my memories and experiences, then maybe it is. And then there's the contrast of like, well, no, the original you is you. That's just a copy. Because if you're there at that point and you both split, they make the copy and they have you, and you both don't live identically, your lives will be changed. You'll both become 2 different creatures or 2 different people, because your experiences are one of the things that shape you. So if you have a different life experience than your copy, then your copy may become a different person. Sure, if you go down the same road, you may turn out the same, but there's no way. There's no way you both are going to live the exact same lives and mimic each other and have it. So it starts to bring into question that idea. But they're going to ascend anyways, because as they're still discussing this, it's just person after person is being sucked into this giant freaking Phalanx star creature that is now floating here.
But it's also asking at the same time. I find it funny is like, do you want to ascend? And meanwhile, like some exterior people are just getting fucked over.
Yeah, I think it's asking them, like, I think that's like individually it's going to them now. Like, pick each one is asking them. Maybe those ones are agreeing. I don't know. I mean, the Phalanx seems very embodying and is like, doesn't care. Like, either we're going to make you one of our greater, like, either they make you one of their greater consciousness and you're a part of it in some unique way, or you become minerals. Like, they just feed on you. They just use you for material. Like the Matrix kind of did, like they turn people into batteries. Like, it seems like the Phalanx will either do that, and what we read in their earlier issues where they kind of broke down and how the worlds work, like the hive minds and the greater worlds and the technarchies and all that. Like, there's some worlds that function to just consume for the Phalanx, and then there are worlds that function to grow the Phalanx in the sense of intelligence and individuals and members. So you can join the greater Phalanx, or you become food for the greater Phalanx. And that seems like that's what's going on right here, is that they're joining in a sense. Whereas the rest of the organic life on the planet and the world and the solar system, it was going to become organic fodder for the Phalanx.
Yes, exactly. And we do not get an answer in this issue, because that concludes this issue, and it ends with a quote, like all issues, and this one's from Professor X. I am not afraid of what I've done, but I do fear what it will one day cost. And that concludes Powers of X, issue number 4. Danny, what did you think of this issue?
It was a very good issue, not only due to the fact that it had some very iconic panels that just stuck out in a very visual way, but conceptually it was a great issue. Like the concepts that they push forth about this idea of self and individualism was great. I mean, look at the end here. The humans fought so hard for individualism against the mutants. They were like, no, we have to stand out. We can't let the mutants erase us and we can't become subservient to them. In the end, the humans are just getting integrated into the greater phalanx, which is just subservient or just subseeding them into data. They're all just being data mined. Even if they become a part of its greater consciousness, they're still just a drop in a bucket. They're no longer their own individualistic self floating around in the universe. They're now just a 1 and 0 in a group of a sea of ones and zeros. And that's kind of the ironic ending for the humans, is they fought this hard to try to preserve their way of life, to just give it up in the end, just have it essentially be taken over, because that's what the phalanx does in the end, is that you're either going to play by their rules or you're going to have to find some other way to convince it or defeat it, which is typically impossible. Usually the phalanx either like gives up or moves on to something else or gets confused, but outright like just defeating them, especially even with the humans advanced as they are, won't work. Even Nimrod points at it and says, like, even I'm far and below beneath them, but I get what their greater objectives are. And Nimrod seems to have a more clear understanding of how the phalanx works, being more computer like himself. But yeah, it was a cool ending. It was a nice way to just close up a lot of this Powers of X stuff that they had started building earlier on. We're starting to tilt towards more of a climactic endpoint here, and I feel like 5 and 6 will bring it all nicely together, because they're at a good like turning point here. So it doesn't feel like we're going to get a rushed ending, because even though it's only going to be a 6-issue each arc for Powers and House, they transition really well in the beginning to the middle to the end, and they don't seem to linger too much. And this is like a good high point of just like, oh man, like look what's happening with the humans, look what's happening in the story, look what the groundwork Professor's setting up. We're moving really fast. And for being like something that jumps from like timeline to timeline, it still feels well knit together and it doesn't feel messy. But walkaway high point, the Apocalypse panel where he's just holding up his 2 swords and just bringing down the lightning and looking awesome. That's
so epic.
MVP moment right there. And the Sinister stuff was good too. I won't take away from any of that. Very funny. A lot of good stuff. A lot of throwback to like some of the other stuff that Hickman was doing during Secret Wars with the Bar Sinister stuff. But still, Apocalypse almost always takes the cake. And then the concepts that they kicked out were great too. But I don't know. What do you feel?
I enjoyed that we get to learn a little bit about Krakoa. We get to learn about its other half, and that it's essentially a sad island, just alone in life, waiting for its other half to come back to it. And it's like, oh, that's sad, buddy. I'm going to sit on top of you. Can I invite 1 million of my friends?
Krakoa is suffering a 1,000+ year-long postpartum depression. Can't quite get over. No amount of Xanax can calm that sadness.
Not at all.
Poor Krakoa.
Poor Krakoa. Oh, yeah, some of the Sinister stuff was interesting, but his character was really different from what I remember Sinister being from the past.
Very different. Very different.
That was, I don't understand why, but I'll wait and see how they play Sinister out over time in Dawn of X.
Yeah, because like the feeling we were getting earlier was definitely something of a Deadpool vibe, a very jokey, fourth wall breaky kind of vibe, which was weird for Sinister. But I mean, if this is a new role that they're going to put him down and there's something more to it, then I'm fine with that. Like maybe it could be a red herring where he's just more menacing and dark, but he's waiting for his moment to change his demeanor.
Could be.
And then he goes back to old Sinister with his weird, crackly, metallic voice.
Yeah.
Was that Sinister voice from like the animated X-Men series very disjaunting to you as like a kid? Do you remember how like unlike it had that weird like robotic like I don't it's hard to replicate it, but it was almost
It was
like
also kind of like
surreal.
smooth too, like a
Yeah,
very
it was
smooth voice, but it was
it
a
was
little slightly robotic too.
yeah, it was like they took a really weird robotic voice and then put it in a studio and like produced it really hardcore.
Oh
Like they
yeah,
put a lot of effect into Sinister's voice versus everyone else kind of just did it naturally as like voice actors. They did it, whereas his actually got like effects, which was kind of funny.
yeah,
But yeah.
interesting.
You used to creep me out though. I always remember hearing it and I'd be like, "That's creepy." Like, Sinister, your voice is sinister. Well done.
Maybe that's what they were going for.
Nailed it.
We got to see Douglas Ramsey and Krakoa's first date. Them getting to know each other. That was kind of hot.
It was love at first touch.
And
Do that scene where he was touching it, like spreading his techno-organic like little like stuff onto it, his little
yeah,
virus inside him. They could have played like some music over that, you know, like what was that? What's the why do birds suddenly appear? Like that's something about Mary like song that they
sure.
that'd have been a good moment right there. But oh well, missed opportunity.
And just all the writing that Hickman's doing that's like making you question like what is the self, what is you, what is human, what is it to mean to be human. It's always great. I like when a writer makes you think about these things, and he's making me think about these things, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, and like we've talked about before, that is a very traditional concept or motif within sci-fi writing. Like good sci-fi writing will always make you stand in a juxtaposition to like who you really are and who the rest of the world may perceive you as. And it's interesting to see that here with what Hickman's been doing and all these like especially Powers. Like Powers seems to be really heavy on the end on that kind of narrative of just like that weird point in time and where humans are now versus where they've been and where they're going. And I love it. It's really great. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with the Phalanx, to see what happens with all our heroes, but we'll have to do that next time on Podcast of X, where we'll read House of X issue number 5. But until then, I'm Kyle. I'm with Danny. Danny, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, you,
That's
you're,
me. Yep.
you're a human. You're a real person in this world. We have an Instagram, so go follow that, I guess, if you'd like to. I try to make memes if I can. I will try to post more frequently if possible. But until next week, we'll catch you later. And remember, the androids are gonna kill us all. So just enjoy your life, and we'll see you next time. Peace. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, we are going back through our classic episodes and uploading them onto YouTube in what we are calling Podcast of X Classics. So be sure to be on the lookout for more classic episodes. And be sure to check out freespeechgeek.com.